Last April, when school was out for a week, Carl, my best friend, and I were alone at our house watching a TV show about cross-dressers. They kept talking about how much fun it was to be all dressed up as an attractive woman. We, Carl and I, to see exactly what they were talking about, decided to try on one of my sister's dresses. We got them from the pile she had ready for the used clothing box at the mall. We really didn't go far. We just put on a dress over our underwear and sat watching TV for a while. It was kind of fun but no biggie, so after a few hours we changed back and never mentioned it again, until last week. Carl brought up the time we dressed as girls and wondered how it would feel if we went a bit further and stayed a bit longer. Back in April we just put the dresses on over our underwear and stayed in them for less than an hour. It didn't take long for him to convince me to go along. He must have planned this because he took a package of panties out of a small bag he had. We did a lot of laughing and giggling as we changed. This time we wore nothing of ours, unless you want to consider the panties ours because Carl bought them. We did borrow 2 of my sister's bras, and since the dresses we wore the last time had been donated to the used clothing shop, we borrowed 2 of her old dresses that she hadn't worn in a long time. We stuffed our bras with face clothes, and when we finished, the strangest thing happened. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch Carl out. We were both looking in the full-length mirror. He asked if we could consider ourselves official girls. I thought he was talking about us being dresses as girls and said we were. Well then, should we act like girls? Not really knowing where he was going, I said I guess we should. Then he leaned over and kissed me on my lips. I was about to deck his ass when he stepped back and told me to hold on a sec. Don't you know that when girls get together they always kiss each other? I thought for a second and remembered that I see my sister, Cassie, and her friends, and other girls do kiss. He was right. I didn't deck him. I kissed him back and we both burst out laughing. We went to watch TV. He took my hand as we walked to the living room as if we were girls. We watched TV all afternoon, sitting a lot closer than we ordinarily sat. I knew that my mom and dad would be home in about an hour, so we had to change clothes. In my room before changing, we kissed again, as girls would do when leaving. The next time was pretty much the same. As soon as we got dressed we kissed hello. I was beginning to enjoy it. Carl has to go to summer school twice a week, so it was 2 days later that he forced me to dress again. To tell the truth, I really liked dressing up and think that if he did not suggest it, I would have. Again, as soon as we were dressed, we kissed hello. We again watched TV until lunchtime when I heated a package of French fries. We both were in a girly mood and really playing it to the hilt until we started to eat. Do you believe in mental telepathy? Well, neither do I, but while eating, there must have been a flash of it in the room. Carl had a French fry sticking out of his mouth. All of a sudden I got the urge to start eating it from the other end. We both chewed on it till our lips met, we kissed again, and before we knew it we had eaten all the fries that way. Then we licked the grease from each other's lips. That was so much fun, and I knew why I see boys and girls do that when eating stuff. But it was usually a boy and a girl, not 2 boys, or in this case, 2 girls. More hand-holding and hugging until we had to change before Mom and Dad were due to come home. My weekend was dull, so I wrote and read a lot. I went online and found out that what Carl and I did was not as unusual as I thought. There are dozens of sites where boys dress as girls, and there are even some clubs where they meet as girls. I would never do something like that, and neither would Carl. As soon as Mom and Dad left for work, Carl called and said he would be over and asked if I wanted to dress up again. I thought about it for about 5 seconds and said it might be fun. I laid out what I wanted to wear and a pile of things for him. I was naked when he came in except for my panties. I was trying to hook my bra. Being the gentleman that he is, he hooked it for me, then started getting dressed himself. In about 5 minutes 2 girls were kissing hello. It has been 3 weeks since Carl and I started our little game, and although it has been a lot of fun, it is starting to get a bit boring being in the house all the time. I guess it was about time to knock it off and get some fresh air for a while. We did, but not exactly the way I planned. It was one day when Carl had classes. I was already dressed and waiting for him to come home. My mother was expecting an important letter and asked me to get it as soon as the mailman dropped it off. I was sitting and looking out the window when I saw the mailman approach our mailbox and put something in. I got up to go and get whatever it was and was just about to open the door when I remembered how I was dressed. Phew, that was close. I didn't want to get changed and Mom did say that it was an important letter. I pondered for a few minutes. I opened the door a bit, looked all around and closed the door. The coast was clear. I took a few deep breaths and opened the door again. People always say that the first step is the hardest, but so are the first 5 or 6. It was no more than 20 feet to the mailbox, but as I walked that 20 feet it felt like 20 miles. The slight breeze blew my skirt around my legs and walking with slight heels on the concrete walk was so different than with my sneakers. I forced myself not to run but stroll casually as if this was a normal thing, a girl walking to her mailbox to get her mail. I took the mail out of the box and looked through it, seeing the letter my mother was expecting. I knew I now had to walk all the way back to my door, but it wasn't nearly as hard walking back. I almost collapsed on the kitchen chair. I called my mother and told her letter had come. She seemed happy and asked me to fax it to her. I wanted to ask her why the sender couldn't just have faxed it to her in the first place. I sent her the fax and called my sister. I had been calling her 2 or 3 times a week, keeping her up on Carl and myself and what we were doing. We, my sister Cassie, and I were close and there were no secrets between us, well, maybe a few. When I told her Carl and I were playing girlfriends, she told me that I could wear almost anything of hers but mentioned a few of her better dresses that if I ever wore she would remove my rectum through my nose. I couldn't wait for Carl to come so I could tell him how brave I was. I knew exactly what time he came home and was ready with a sandwich and soda when I saw him come up the walk. All of a sudden a picture of Donna Reed popped into my mind. As soon as he opened the door I was there with a big kiss to welcome him. It was so different kissing him as a boy than as my girlfriend, it seemed nicer and more fun. He must have liked it too because instead of our usual holding hands he put his arms around me and pulled me tight. All our other kisses lasted from half a second to maybe a second, this one lasted a good 5 seconds. We separated and I could see something in his eyes that I had never seen before, and I liked the look. There was complete silence for a few seconds. Just to break the silence I spoke. Do you want to change first or would you rather eat? I'd rather eat. I can't change. I have a doctor's appointment in an hour. You seem different. Did something happen? I told him about going to the mailbox while he ate. Before we knew it, it was time for him to go. We kissed again, but this time, like the last time, it was no girlfriend's kiss. I could taste him on my lips for a long time. I was waiting for him when he came back from the doctor's, and this time it was not 2 girlfriends but a boyfriend and girlfriend who greeted each other. It was late so he did not change, we just did what we usually did, sat and watched TV, but this time it was so much more fun. He put his arm around me and I cuddled up to him all the while. I was so sorry to see him leave. Carl and I have been lovers for about a month now and I have been in heaven loving every minute of it. Weekends were the worst because of my parents being home. I think the 2 days he had to go to summer school were the best because he was my boyfriend on those days while on the other days we were girlfriends. Yesterday we did something daring so I will take the time now to tell you about it. It was one of our girlfriend days. We went for a walk around the block. We were in our girlfriends mode. Every day since this started, well, maybe a few days after it started, I have been going out for the mail as soon as it came. There was no reason for this, I just was being bold going out dressed in my sister's clothes. Carl always chickened out, but this day I convinced him to accompany me on my mail run. He took my hand as we walked to the mailbox. I guess he was nervous. He squeezed my hand a little tighter as we walked to the mailbox after the mailman left the mail. We got back in the house and he hugged me and told me how much fun that was. The next day there was no mail for us, but Carl wanted to go out anyway, so did I. It was the fun of being outside for a change instead of being in the house all the time. We got to the mailbox and opened it just to be sure. It was empty. "Do you feel bold?" he asked me as we stood by the mailbox. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Let's go for a walk around the block." He pulled me to the sidewalk and we started walking. I wasn't too worried about meeting anyone on my block because I knew that almost everyone who lived there was at work. My sister and I are the only kids on our block. Carl and I just walked down the block holding hands as any two girls would, our skirts flapping in the breeze. The block opposite my house was a shopping block with stores, so there were several people walking, but no one seemed to pay any attention to the two girls window shopping. I was having a good time, and from the smile on Carl's face, so was he. We must have looked in every window on that block. By the time we got back home, I realized we had been out a bit over an hour. That started something that we did 2 or 3 times a week. On the days that Carl had school, he didn't dress, but I did, and we went out as boyfriend and girlfriend, and I liked that way so much better. By the end of summer, Carl was no longer my girlfriend, but I was still his. Weekends were always the worst for us both because my parents were home on weekends. I always called my sister on weekends and told her all about my week. She loved hearing about her sister and what she was doing. Carl and I had taken many pictures, and she couldn't wait to come home and see them. Do you believe in miracles? I don't either, but the last 2 weekends of the summer sort of made me believe in them. Did I mention that my sister was a camp counselor? The weekend before the last one when camp closed for the season was visiting day, and the next weekend, the last one, was usually a sort of goodbye party for all the counselors and guests. That doesn't sound like a miracle, does it? What about if you add the fact that this year my parents were to attend seminars for both weekends? When my sister found that out, she made plans for both of us. She would get a chance to see her sister in the flesh. She convinced me to come for visiting day as her sister. That sounded like so much fun. I told Carl about it and he thought it would be cool. Mom and Dad would go to the seminar right from work Friday. I would catch an early bus to the camp, spend all day with my sister, and catch the last bus home. I was both excited and nervous about being among a lot of people as a girl for so long a time, but Carl and I had been out places, mostly as a couple, that I was sort of used to being out as a girl, but we mostly just went to the park and ate the sandwiches we bought for lunch. I knew I could handle this. I wanted to handle this. I knew exactly what I was going to wear for my visit. Carl took me to the bus station where we kissed goodbye like two lovers. Before I boarded my bus, he told me to be a good girl and to stay away from those guy counselors. The bus ride was a little over an hour. My mind was on what my sister, Cassie, would think of me. Would she think I was cute or not? I hoped she would. The moment of truth came. As the bus pulled into the camp, I saw her standing there. I took a deep swallow and stepped off the bus, nearly falling on my ass because I was wearing high heels. Great minds think alike, because so was she. It took her a second to recognize me, but we were soon hugging each other. She told me I was beautiful, but did scold me a little because I was wearing one of her good skirts. I told her I wanted to look my best, so she forgave me. Then I realized this was the first time we had ever hugged each other. She introduced me around to some of her girlfriends who I thought were hot and wished I had been meeting them as myself. We went to her cabin, which she shared with 3 other counselors, so I could clean up after my ride. After doing what a person does after a long ride, she fixed my makeup. I only wore lipstick because that is all I knew how to use. Cassie put all that other stuff on me, and when she was finished, I was almost beautiful. She showed me all around camp, which was difficult because we were both wearing heels. At the cafeteria, I got a big lump in my stomach. She introduced me to a guy and his brother. She had been going with Herman all summer. They talked with each other while Edgar, Herman's brother, and I sat there. Ed started talking to me as we ate. After eating, we couldn't get rid of them, so for the rest of the day it was the 4 of us. After lunch we went on a nature hike. Let me tell you something. Going on a nature hike is nothing to do in heels. We had to be helped all the time by Herman and Edgar. Herman and Cassie did a lot of talking about the party next weekend, and would you believe it, Edgar asked me if I wanted to be his date for the farewell dance. Naturally I refused. There was no way I wanted to go on a date with a guy. The very thought repulsed me. It never occurred to me that this is exactly what I was doing with Carl. Edgar was very persuasive and almost convinced me. Cassie and Herman were going, but there was a small problem. It was a formal dance and her gown was at home. We were waiting for the bus to pick up the visitors. The four of us were standing together. I sure wish you would reconsider and be my date next week, Ed said. I do too, said Cassie. I looked at her with a "what the hell are you trying to do to me" look. You have to come to bring me my gown. You might as well bring one for yourself and come to the dance. Come on, it will be fun. You've never been to a fancy dance before. Please. I never really could say no to Cassie, so I did what I thought was the stupidest thing I ever did. I said yes, but with a condition. I knew all the gowns Cassie had, and she had this beautiful blue one that I secretly lived. If I could wear that one, I would do it. I knew it would fit because I had tried it on several times, but just putting it on with no padding or stuff. The boys waited by the bus with us and Edgar held my hand the whole time. I was beginning to enjoy it, holding his hand, and when he put his arm around me on the hike we went on where because of my heels I kept tripping and falling. The bus pulled in and I got on and started to giggle like a girl every time I thought of Edgar treating me like I was a girl. Carl was at the bus to meet me. We kissed as if we had not seen each other in days, or weeks, instead of just a few hours. During the short walk back to my house, I told him all about having to go back next week to bring Cassie's gown and having a date with Edgar. When I told him that, he seemed to change. I didn't know what bug crawled up his ass, and I really didn't care. It was that night that I found out. He was jealous that I was going out with another guy. What the hell is he thinking? I wasn't dating some other guy. How could I do that when I am a guy myself? I am not interested in other guys. I am not even interested in guys. Just Carl, and we were not seeing each other. We were just having some fun. He asked if he could stay the night. We have had sleepovers a lot of times before, so I said sure. Then he actually stammered that he wanted to stay with Diane, the name he used for me when I was dressed up. After we ate, he went home to change and pack a bag for the night. It was getting late, so I slipped into a nightgown, one of Cassie's that I liked. It looked so good on her and I wanted to see how it would look on me, and it came with panties and a sleep bra. I was ready by the time Carl came back. He only lived 2 blocks away. We sat in the couch watching TV with me cuddled up in his arms and occasionally kissing each other. Bedtime, he stripped to his shorts, which is usually what I slept in too when we had sleepovers. When I was ready to get in bed, I saw him lying on top of the bed and he had a hard-on sticking out of his fly. I giggled until I saw the look on his face. It scared me for a second. We had slept together every time he stayed at my house, or I stayed at his, and, if the truth be told, we had hard-ons from time to time. It was still warm out, so, as usual, we slept on top of the covers. Now, to be truthful, every time we slept over during the past year or so we did a bit of experimenting with each other. Boys do that, and so too, I assume, do girls. This night was so different. Other nights we did little more than touch each other's private parts. Carl started it by pulling up my nightgown and reaching inside my panties to play with my penis. I cuddled up to him and grabbed his, and from here on you can use your own imagination. I will tell you that it was the best night I ever had. All the next week Carl and I went places, as boyfriend and girlfriend, as soon as he came over to my house. He took me to lunch every day. We even went to a movie one afternoon. Time was passing and soon I was on the bus to my sister's camp, but this time I was loaded down with an overnight case and 2 big garment bags holding our gowns. Now, being a boy, there were some things I didn't think of and a few things I never considered. We will get to them when we get to them. As before, I saw Cassie waiting for me at the camp bus stop. After hugging me, she checked the gowns to be sure that I had brought the right one for her. She was glad to see the one I picked for myself. We carried the things to her cabin where I again met her bunkmates, but one was missing. She had already gone home. Last week I had taken an immediate liking to all three of the girls, so I was treated as an old friend. We talked for a while, then I asked where I could put my things. I was told that I could leave them there. But I'll need them to change tonight, and shouldn't they be where I am going to be staying so I can change? You will be changing here, and you will be staying here in the empty bunk, Cassie said. I just looked at her and squeezed her knee under the table we were sitting at. What's the problem? Cassie asked. I again glared at her. I can't stay here. Cassie again looked at me as if she didn't see the problem, then she burst out laughing. I see. Well, sweetheart, there is no problem. Both Amy and Beth know about you. It was their idea for you to use the empty bunk. Amy and Beth both chimed in that they thought it was so cool to have a boy in their bunk room even though he was pretending to be a girl. This was a relief to me after I stopped shaking. They were both beautiful girls, and if I was a guy, I would have loved to sleep with either of them. We talked for a long time about me and my dressing, and they seemed so truly interested in my story. Beth asked me if I liked boys, and I told her emphatically, no. Carl didn't count for some reason. Then she asked me how I felt about being Ed's date tonight. I didn't know I was his date and told her. They told me that I was all he could talk about all week. Well, this was awkward. I had been thinking of him all week too, but finding that he liked me made it so final. I don't know how I was to respond to a guy holding me, but then I thought about Carl, who I never mentioned to the girls. Maybe I could just pretend that it was Carl holding me and dancing with me. It was soon time for us to get dressed. I thought it would be difficult being the only guy in a small cabin with three beautiful girls, no perversion here, and my sister is beautiful, but we were so busy getting dressed that I had no time to think of it. We all finished at about the same time except for our makeup. I asked the girls if one of them could help me with mine because this was so special that I knew I would need help. I was good enough for casual but not for this. We were all picked up by our dates. I think that is better than boyfriends, to get us to the mess hall, dance hall on time. Ed kept telling me how beautiful I was, which was so embarrassing. I had the best time ever. There was a lot of partner switching going on, but mostly I stayed with Ed. I never told the girls this, but he kissed me a few times and he was so much better than Carl. He could give Carl lessons. I would remember what he taught me and try it on Carl when next we met. The last dance finally came and we were all escorted back to our cabins and we all got a final kiss from our guys. I had no choice but to let the girls see me and Ed making out, but I think they were all so busy with what they were doing I don't think they saw or cared. Embarrassment number 2 came when we were getting ready for bed. I thought I would be in a guest cabin, so brought nothing to sleep in. I always sleep in a t-shirt and boxers. Beth came to the rescue by loaning me a gown of hers. It was a very pretty gown and fit so well that it might have been made for me. We talked for what seemed hours about the dance and must have all fallen asleep because the next thing I knew it was bright sunshine and I was hit with a pillow. A pillow fight ensued among the 4 of us. The head counselor broke it up and told us we had better get dressed because breakfast was being served. I was smart enough to bring something to wear home. Cassie was so surprised to see it because she had never seen it. It was a gift from Carl one day when we were at the mall. We were at the mall and I saw it and told Carl how cute it was. He dared me to go try it on and said that if I did, and it fit, he would buy it for me. Well, I nerved up and tried it on, although I was a nervous wreck because I was sure that the sales girl would come in and see that I was not a girl and I would go to jail and be a criminal. Well, it fit and looked so good on me that I made him buy it. I had never worn it except in the store when trying it on. It was a plaid skirt with a white off-the-shoulders top. I wore dark pantyhose under it. Cassie told me that she would be wearing it soon. I knew that my dresses obsessions were now going to be few and far between now that summer is over. She reminded me that there was still after school before Mom and Dad came home, which was about 3 to 4 hours, better than nothing. We said our goodbyes to Amy and Beth, and I thanked them for making yesterday and last night so much fun. I was so glad that Ed did not show up. That might have been embarrassing in front of the girls, especially my sister. Carl was at the bus at home and again greeted me as if I had been gone for days. I taught him some of what I learned from Ed last night. I think we embarrassed Cassie a bit. I changed back to Ron with a few hours to spare. There were a lot of Diane sessions, but they were so short to be real fun. But once a month Mom and Dad went to seminars, then Diane was around all weekend. Sometimes Cassie would pick up a guy and there would be the four of us, Diane, Carl, Cassie and whoever she was with that day. I wonder if I could get a job as a counselor next year. I am sure Cassie would want me as a bunkmate. I wonder if Ed will be there.